These are 5 tools from Harbor Freight that even a hater would love, but there's 3 at Harbor Freight that I actually would avoid. Let's go. If you'd like to check out any of these tools, I'll link them in the description and the pinned comment to help you find them easier. This video is not sponsored. I bought all these. First on the list, the Hercules dust extractor, probably the best Harbor Freight tool that come out in 2024, in my opinion. Now this thing is awesome, but it has a couple of drawbacks that some people pointed out in that review, but I still think it's one of the best budget dust extractors on the market. First, why would you even want a dust extractor versus just a regular shop vac that costs much less in basically any brand? First and foremost is you have volume control on the dust extractor that you don't have on shop vacs. So what that means is it allows you to dial up or down the suction depending on the tool you're going to use. So if you're sanding, you want to actually dial it down a little bit so it's not pulling as much of suction through the hose, which actually sucks the sander down to the surface, causing those little swirl marks that you see when you put the finish on. When you dial this back, it's still pulling air through the sander, pulling out that dust, extracting the dust, but it's not pulling so hard that it's sticking to the surface. That's one of the main purposes behind a dust extractor. Or you can turn it up to full blast, getting as much suction as possible to get as much dust collection as possible when you use tools like track saws and routers, among other things. Another thing dust extractors offers that most shop vacs do not is automatic filter cleaning, and this has it built in as well. I think it's a fantastic feature on this dust extractor, especially at this price point. Basically what it's doing is rerouting the airflow a little bit so that it cleans those filters, but you don't notice any difference in your suction. So it's just a brief thing that cleans those filters, keeps them operating at full capacity. Because if you don't know, if you stop those filters up, you lose a ton of suction. And included with this dust extractor is a bag to help prevent those filters from getting stopped up as often or as much, because this bag actually collects most of the dust. I was going to say 99%, but I don't know the actual figure, but it does collect the majority of the dust, so those filters do stay very clean. Another fantastic feature of this dust extractor is the fact that it has onboard power, so you can plug the dust extractor in. It's got a very long cord on it, and then you plug your tool into the dust extractor. And where that comes in handy is if you're using a sander or any other corded tool, when you power the tool on, it powers the dust extractor on, so you don't have to do that separately. It's a nice convenience. You can also just use the switch to turn it on and off if you don't want to plug it in there. A couple of things that impressed me with the Hercules dust extractor is the fact it has these nice big wheels to roll around. That might not seem like a big deal, but on the DeWalt dust extractor that I had for years, it had very small wheels and it was always getting hung up on cords and things like that. Having these bigger tires, basically kind of outdoor ready tires, but in the shop, it just rolls over things a lot better. They also included some really cool things here, like onboard storage for your attachments, and that's where kind of this shines too, because not all dust extractors, or most actually, don't come with these floor cleaning attachments, which is handy for helping clean up around the shop, extra dust that hits the floor, stuff like that. I'm glad they included that, and there's several different attachments that they actually included here, which most people don't. So I'm proud to see that, especially because they're keeping the price lower on this dust extractor. Also included a nice extendable handle, a place to roll your cord up, just a really good option for a dust extractor here if you're in the market. Now while I was using this and testing it back in 2024, I found this thing to perform fantastic. Like, you can't see no performance difference in this versus the Festool, which is way more expensive at about $800 versus this one, which is only at $300. I think it's a fantastic value if you need a dust extractor, but there is a couple of drawbacks here that some people pointed out in that original review. The main drawback that a lot of people pointed out is this power up front, which is only at 3.5 amps. Now, if you think about that, a lot of your routers and things like that are at 12 amps. So it's not recommended that you plug in here if it's over 3.5 amps. So you're thinking sanders mostly is what should be plugged in here. But why is that? Why is it only 3.5 amps? Well, this tool is actually a 15 amp tool. And if you look on the back, it says that the motor on this dust extractor is 11.5 amps, which leaves you 3.5 amps to get to 15. That's where they're giving up some of the power draw going to the motor. In other words, how much suction you get versus what's on the front. Now, there's a couple of ways to bypass that. Well, one really, and that is to plug the tool in somewhere else, and then you just won't have that auto on. But that is a drawback that some people pointed out. Could be a deal breaker for some. I don't think so. Another drawback could be the warranty. Now, this only has a 90-day warranty, and a lot of people in the original review pointed out that you could actually buy an extended warranty at Harbor Freight for not a lot of money. And then a lot of people also pointed out that they didn't like the 90-day warranty, but I don't think it's a major issue. If you decide you wanted one, you could also pick up the extra warranty, especially if you catch this on sale. Speaking of sale, this thing has actually been out of stock for the most part since we posted that original review. So if you're looking for this, you'll just have to keep checking the website. That has come to be known as the outlaw effect. When I show something that sells out, so I even named my second channel after that, the outlaw effect. You should check it out. Overall, I think if you're looking for a dust extractor and you like Harbor Freight tools, I think this is a fantastic option that even haters would love to have in the shop. Number 2 on the list is the Bremen parallel clamps. I think these are some of the best budget clamps on the market. Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with that, or at least some people don't agree with that, but I think for the price that you're getting these at, if you use them like you should be using a parallel clamp, you're not gonna have any issues and you're gonna save a lot of money. Now look, I've got jet clamps, I've got Bessie clamps, and I've got a whole host of other parallel clamps up there, and I think these Bauer clamps are just fine. Now, are they made as heavy duty as these other higher end clamps? No, but I think that for most people, if you're just doing some cutting boards, you're just doing some small glue ups here and there, I think these parallel clamps are a fantastic value. Comparing the prices of, say, the Bremen against the Bessie or the Jet, you're looking at only $30 for the Bremen, $50 for the Bessie, and $80 for the Jet. So you're saving a lot of money if you decide to go with the Bremen, but are you giving up a lot of quality for that price? Well, maybe, but it's gonna be hard to justify for most people, I think. First off, the way these are constructed, I think you'll notice right off the bat, is the jaws are a little more robust on the Jet and the Bessie. You can see how they're riveted in there, where this one only has a single pin. So I think you're gonna notice quite a bit of difference as far as the robustness of these just on the build quality alone, but again, you're paying quite a bit more money. Now, as far as the handles and the jaws and everything on the bottom, all of these are made out of metal. It looks plastic, but it's actually, see that magnet sticks to it. These are all actually some sort of metal. This might be some type of aluminum or cast because it doesn't actually stick, but it does on the Jet and the Bremen. As far as the handles go, this is one of the better handles as far as I'm concerned on parallel clamps, but the Bessies are also good and the Jet also. Now, as far as the bars go on these clamps, I think the Bessie and the Bremen are actually really, really close as far as the thickness, how they operate. Like, I've seen very little difference. I think the Jet has a slightly better bar. It's more of a slicker metal. I don't get the same glue stick as I do on the Bremen or the Bessie, but again, it's also an $80 clamp, and I only have one of those. I have several Bessies and also the Bremen. So I think the Bremen, for the price here, it's hard to hate it. It really is. Next on the list are some of the items I think that most everybody can use in the shop, no matter what kind of shop you have and no matter what you're doing, actually. And I think it's these magnetic accessories that you can get at Harbor Freight. Now, I use these all the time and I think they're fantastic. I think everybody should actually pick up some of these trays, and they have multiple colors available. And what I like to do with these is just for loose parts and just for driver bits. I always keep these kind of on my Omni wall over there or on this toolbox here because they are magnetic. They'll stick to basically anything that's metal. And then you can also keep up with all your bits and things like that. That's where I usually keep my driver bits. And if I'm working on something or if I'm assembling a tool or something like that, it has a lot of loose parts or bolts and screws and things like that, that's where these come in handy a lot. Now, another little jewel that's magnetic that I really enjoy having in the shop, because I'm always needing paper towels, and that's the paper towel holder. It's like stupid simple to put a paper towel on there or a paper towel roll, and then you've got access to your paper towels wherever you have metal. Now, Harbor Freight has a ton of magnetic accessories like tool holders and all kinds of stuff for very good prices. I think if you're gonna buy these magnetic stuff, Harbor Freight's just as good as any. Number 4 on the list, I'm bundling these two together because they're literally handy as a shirt pocket, depending on how big your shirt pocket is. Now, first up is this bar clamp. This is a 50-inch bar clamp, and this thing's only 20 bucks. And I have used this a ton over the years for a variety of projects. I used to build flags, a lot of flags actually. And I was able to use these to clamp the flags up because I could keep them flat on the surface of this. They were wide enough that I could use them before I had parallel clamps, because these are similar to a parallel clamp in the kind of the way they work, but it gives me that wider, flatter clamping surface, and I was able to make these flags. Without this, I don't think I would have been able to do it as easy. Now, these aren't the greatest clamps on earth, I'll admit to that, but for what you're using them for, they're fantastic. Now, I think that there's a couple of things you could do to shore these up a little bit, and I've seen this done online. Inside this is hollow on the back side. I've seen people cut wood and stick in here to kind of make this, really make this a lot more solid. But I really haven't needed that to be that solid. Building flags, I even used 2 of them together to hold my workbench together while the glue dried. So they're very handy to have, and they're only $20 for these larger ones, and they have shorter ones for less expensive. But I find it's very difficult to find clamps this big at this price, and I think everybody should have a couple of these. Now, part B to number 4 is hand screw clamps. These are some of the most useful clamps you can get for your shop for a variety of reasons, and they're very, very, very cheap at Harbor Freight. And I've seen zero quality difference in these Pittsburgh clamps versus some that I've gotten from other places. These start at about $10 a piece, and you could probably get the smaller ones even cheaper than that. These are 8-inch clamps, and this is kind of the perfect size in my opinion for what I'm doing in my shop. And you can use these for a variety of uses, like holding very small parts at the drill press, or creating a vertical vise at your workbench, or stop blocks at the router table, or a number of other uses. You can also use these to help hold plywood vertically, so if you're building cabinets and things like that, I find that to be quite useful as well. These things are extremely handy to have in the shop. I find to have 4 of them on hand usually is about the best. That way you can have the vertical vise and you can have a couple for helping you out for other things. Number 5 on the list is the brand new, as of 2025, Bauer miter gauge with a couple caveats. Now, this miter gauge is only $45 at the time of filming, and it's probably one of the cheaper miter gauges with a fence, with stop blocks, that extends at this price point, and it's coming from Harbor Freight. I tested this myself, and I think it's a pretty good value if you can get past a couple of little things that I would wish was a little different. But I do think if you just need a miter gauge, you set it square, and you're just cutting square cuts, and that's all you're gonna use it for, I think this is a perfect little miter gauge at this price point for those that like shopping at Harbor Freight. I even think a lot of haters will like this one as well. Now, it's an all metal construction. You can adjust it to fit your miter slot, 3/4 inch miter slots. I think it's a perfect size, especially for the contractor saws, but you can also use it on a bigger cabinet style saw as well. Now, one thing I really like is the fact that you do have an extension wing on here that gets you about 24 inches just to help extra support out there. And it also is easy to adjust. In my testing, I was able to get perfect 90-degree cuts, perfect 45-degree cuts with this miter gauge. However, the actual hard stops or the included detents were off just a slight amount. So I couldn't actually use those. I actually wound up just setting it 90 degrees to my blade and then cutting. I had zero issues. That's why I say some caveats here, because there are some about double the price, more expensive miter gauges like the one from Vevor that the detents are actually 90 degrees on or 45 degrees on. So it makes it much quicker to swap angles, things like that. But if you just set it, forget it, this is one of those that could be a good option for your shop. Now, here's 3 tools I would avoid at Harbor Freight based on my experience with them. First off, the F-style bar clamps just aren't that great. One thing I noticed is the bar is actually way too soft of metal to actually get any amount of clamping force on there. Now, if you're just using them for extreme light duty, you might can get by with it. But if you start clamping down on it, you'll notice that that metal starts bending pretty bad. I would actually avoid those and go with something like Irwin or even Bessie or Jorgensen. Actually is my favorite F-clamp. I think they're just better quality and you'll be happier long term. The number 2 tool I would avoid at Harbor Freight is a lot of their measuring devices. I went into the store and I just did a quick test. I took 2 rulers, I laid them down, lined them up, and went from 0 to 36 inches. At 36 inches, these 2 rulers are off almost a 1/16 inch between the 2 of them. Man, I just have a hard time recommending buying something like that. There's a lot of other good options out there. iGaging makes some good ones that are very inexpensive if you're looking for rulers and things like that. Tape measures might be okay. I've never used a Harbor Freight tape measure, but at the price that you can get my favorite tape measure, wherever it's at, the Fast Cap Old Standby, or one of the most popular tape measures I've shown is the fast cap lefty-righty where you can read it from both sides. It also has those increments on there. If you're not familiar with tape measures, or if you just want to look down and quickly find your 1/8 inch or your 1/2 inch, it's already marked on there. A lot of people love that tape measure, and it's very inexpensive. I would highly recommend just going with one of those versus measuring devices at Harbor Freight. But if I'm wrong, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments. The number 3 tool I would avoid at Harbor Freight is, and I may get a little pushback on this one, the Hercules sander. Now, I tested this and tried to find the best sander for under $100 on the market. And I think it was like 15 or 16 different sanders that we put through the test. And I sanded with them for long periods of time to see how the vibration was, the heat buildup, dust collection, a whole number of things. And the Hercules did not fare that well. I just was not impressed with that, especially for the price you're paying for it at about $55. The Craftsman at about that same price point is an amazing little sander for $50-something. You can pick it up on Amazon. I'll link to it in the description if you want to check it out. It looks identical to one of my favorite sanders under $100, and that was the DeWalt. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're coming out of the exact same factory, the Craftsman and the DeWalt. They look so similar, they're just a different color. The DeWalt I think is a little bit better. You get variable speed with that, so you do get a little extra nicety if you bump up $20 or $30 to that DeWalt. But for the price and the performance you're getting out of the Hercules sander, I just don't think it's worth that $55 when there's other better options on the market. If you found some Harbor Freight tools that you think even haters would love, drop them in the comments. I would love to check them out. In the meantime, check out that video, the Hercules Dust Extractor, full review. You'll be very impressed, I'm sure of it. Click in that box, get you the big old virtual fist bump. Thank you for watching. Oh, subscribe if you haven't already.